Hello, this is Ohio Dan again. I wanted to make a video that is basically a response/expansion on a video that Jo the Philosopher made several months ago now. And for people that are not familiar with Jo the Philosopher's channel, he really deserves to have a much bigger audience than what he does. He is one of the top content producers today, in my opinion, just from what I've seen, in terms of more hard-hitting, to-the-point videos on MGTOW, red pill, and black pill type of topics. He really just speaks his mind. He's a very well-spoken person and really deserves to have a lot more views and subscribers, in my opinion. But he did a video a while back on toxic relationships. That's literally what it's called, is on toxic relationships. It was basically about how we take degenerate behavior from women and we excuse it, or we more or less allow women to act like train wrecks and to basically just be immature and degenerate. And we make excuses for that, and we allow those kinds of women to kind of stay around us, right? We think it's cute, or we think that it's interesting, and we want to be around it because we find those women attractive in a lot of cases. And a lot of this is, my interpretation of his video, right? I'm trying to kind of expand on those ideas from my point of view. But basically, this idea that we just don't hold women to the same standard in relationships. And this could happen the other way around, where, women still are attracted to guys that act like this, but generally speaking, that's not the case. It's more a matter of men excusing this sort of immature, degenerate behavior from women and making it out to be interesting or somehow something that's worth investing in or spending your time on. And I kind of wanted to expand on that by saying that degenerate behavior has to be recognized for what it is, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman expressing it, and regardless of whether you find that woman to be superficially attractive, right? It's not cute behavior just because it happens to be a woman that, and I'm going to use some of the examples that Jo used and some others probably as well that are similar, but a woman that does drugs, or a woman that's drunk all the time, right? She's showing up to work drunk or hungover, or not even just being limited to work, but just different places in public where she's wasted, or, women that are not responsible for their sexuality whatsoever, right? They sleep with random guys, they cheat on their partners. It's not even so much a matter of the immoral nature of that behavior, though. It's just degenerate and immature, right? Those kinds of women are not cute. They're not attractive. They're not women that you want to really hang around. And we really wouldn't excuse that kind of behavior from men. We wouldn't say that, well, this guy is completely irresponsible in the way that he does things, and he's drunk half the time, and he's basically fucking random women when maybe he has a partner or maybe he doesn't. But it's different in terms of how some of this stuff is looked at or analyzed, depending on whether it's a man or a woman, right? In other words, the whole topic of men sleeping around versus women sleeping around and trying to compare that is kind of its own issue. But when women act in a way that's not responsible and that doesn't refer back to having, a mentally stable way of doing things, that shouldn't really be treated as cute or interesting or as something that can be desired, right? Something that could possibly be positive in your personal interactions with that person, with that woman. It's not different just because she's female. If it's immature or degenerate behavior in a guy, it's the same with a woman. The main difference actually is that women who act this way pose more of a direct threat to you or a danger to you, because women that act in a degenerate or immature or irresponsible way, they can often blame that on men, right? They can blame it on the nearest man around them, and that could potentially be you if you are involved with her somehow, right? Because men who act foolish or have these sort of negative behavior traits, you can hang out with them, and as long as they're not trying to fight you, as long as they're not trying to get you to engage them in drug use or whatever, as long as they're basically doing their own thing, they're not going to be able in most cases to blame you for it. It's unlikely that they can do that successfully because society doesn't put up with that from men, right? Society will basically say you as a guy need to shape up and actually get your act together and stop drinking all the time and stop doing drugs or whatever the case may be, right? Or if the guy obviously is fooling around with a bunch of different women every weekend or whatever, if he's Chad or Tyrone or that type of guy, right? He's a player. If he gets a woman pregnant, that's not going to be your problem. I mean, it just isn't. So if he makes these kinds of poor life choices on a regular basis, and he has bad habits in that regard, again, just degenerate behavior, it's not likely to come back on you unless he's wanting to like beat the crap out of you or something like that and challenge you to fights all the time. Except for that type of thing, right? These guys are not nearly as much of a threat. Or I guess they could be drunk and you could get in a car with them and that could be a problem. They're driving. But other than that, right, it's the women that are actually a threat to you in this situation, because it can actually cause major problems with your life if you try to actually associate either as a friend or as a fuck buddy or whatever the case may be. Not that I'm suggesting any particular lifestyle with that, but right, whether you find her attractive or not, they may be fun to be around, but they're often mentally unstable and they will make you pay a steep price if you try to mess with them. Because let's say that you are sexually involved with her, and then let's say that she was drunk while that was happening. Well, we all know within the men's community, or many of us do, that she can come back later and say, oh, I really didn't consent because I was drunk or I was on drugs. It's also very likely that these kinds of women, not only do they not take personal responsibility for a lot of their choices on a regular basis, but they also tend to have a negative view of men, right? They're going to, because they've been ran through by so many different guys. If they're sexually irresponsible with their choices, there's a very good chance that they're not going to have a problem. They're not going to have any qualms with making a false accusation against you, right? You may say or do something she doesn't like, or you may challenge her and say, hey, you know, maybe you need to quit getting dicked down by every dude in town, right? Maybe you need to not be drunk when you go to work. Maybe you need to not do drugs because that's bad for your system. If you challenge them in that kind of way, they may get angry, and they may, again, because they really don't have a moral compass to begin with, they're degenerate in terms of how they approach life, they may have no problem just making an accusation against you and say, well, you tried to beat me, or you tried to have sex with me and I didn't consent, right? We all know what that's called. These kinds of women are far more likely to be mentally unstable, to have a negative view of men, and to have no problem just accusing you of something. So not only is it not cute that women act this way, not only should we live in a society where men and women are supposed to be equal. That's another series of videos, right? That's another major topic. We kind of know that men and women in many ways may or may not be equal, depending on what your tool for measuring that equality may be. But we know that women are not held to equal standards as men, right? But if women are supposed to be equal and men doing these kinds of things is frowned upon, and you add into the equation the sort of risk that being around these kinds of women that act in a way that's degenerate actually brings onto you potentially, the point that I'm trying to make is it's actually pretty important to kick these women out of your life and just not associate with them, right? If you know a woman is promiscuous, and again, this could be its own video, don't associate with her, right? Don't be one of the guys that she's fucking on the side. If you are going to have friends with benefits types of things, then it might be hard to sort of get around that. But for the most part, you probably don't want to deal with that, right? You don't want to be around women that don't make sexually responsible choices. You don't want to be around women that probably have a negative view of men because of their sexual history. You don't want to deal with that. So if you find out that she's been riding a different dick every week, you probably don't want to be friends with her. If she is someone that is doing drugs or drunk all the time, you don't want to be friends with her. You don't want to associate with that. And I know this is sort of a disclaimer, or sort of a, not really a counter argument, but sort of a point that should probably be made, is I get that when we're younger, we tend to make decisions like that. You know, in my college years, I got too drunk several times. I didn't make good decisions. I was hungover at work or whatever. But I outgrew those kinds of behaviors. And The thing is, our society really doesn't necessarily make women outgrow that, because it's always a guy's fault that she got pregnant, or it's always some other thing that made her get drunk that night or whatever, and then she cheated on you, or then she got violent. And that's another aspect of this, right? If you have a woman that's mentally unstable and on drugs or drinking alcohol on a consistent, constant basis, and she decides to get belligerent with you, and you're the nearest guy that she decides to go after because she's belligerent, what can you do? We know what the situation for men is with that. If you hit back, you are a monster. Society is going to view you as a monster, and you're going to get the crap beat out of you by a bunch of white knights and probably go to jail. If you don't fight back, then you get to have a woman beat the crap out of you, and then you're going to be called a pussy, right? I mean, all you can do is just get that woman away from you, and it's better to do that sooner rather than later, before it even gets to that point, by not dealing with women that exhibit this kind of degenerate behavior in the first place. So in conclusion, guys, I'd have a list of things that you know you don't want to put up with from women, that you know that if women express these kinds of behaviors, probably she's going to be able to get away with that, and there's a good chance that she could blame you or the nearest guy for acting that way. She can hold the guy around her responsible rather than actually have to grow up at some point, the way that most of us do. And again, I'm not saying all women will continue to act this way for the rest of their lives, but that's not what matters. What matters is, if a woman is this way now, you don't want to be her friend. You don't want to associate with her. You don't want to be the guy that she blames when she gets too drunk and has a one-night stand with you or somebody else and just makes accusations against you or whoever happens to be the unlucky guy in that situation, right? You don't even want to be in that position where that can happen to you. You want to stay away from women that exhibit certain behaviors, and it's up to you guys, of course, it's up to everyone as an individual to determine what those degenerate behaviors are, right? I just listed some obvious ones, but women that basically are not going to be mentally stable, they can get away with acting the way that they do because, as Jo the Philosopher mentioned, a lot of this is just interpreted as being cute or as being free-willed or free-minded and being not a conformist or whatever the case may be. It really is just being a train wreck, and it's exhibiting degenerate behavior, but that train wreck has much more of a propensity to affect you as the individual man than a guy that acts that way. Because a guy that acts that way is going to be required at some point to change or to suffer the consequences himself, right? A guy in that situation oftentimes cannot get away with that same kind of behavior for a long period of time. So unless he's trying to fight you or something of that nature, it gets to that extent, he's not going to be a direct threat to you, where a woman that acts like a train wreck, she can basically have you be involved in that train wreck, right? You can wreck right along with her if you put yourself in a position to actually be a part of her life. And what I'd recommend is you have a list of behaviors where it's like, nope, it's not even a red flag type of thing. It's an absolute warning to you to just stay away from that particular female. It's not even a red flag of, she has a kid, so I don't want to deal with her in terms of dating. That's not even what this is, right? You can want to get married to a woman if that's still your mindset and still stay away from this particular type of woman that's degenerate. That would be the point that I'm trying to make more than anything with this video, is this kind of thing can actually affect you a lot more when it's a woman that's acting in this sort of degenerate way, and you just don't want to even try to be her friend in the first place, in my view. It's actually worse than when a man acts that way. The last thing that I want to say in this video is to check out Jo the Philosopher's channel. He has a lot of really good, hard-hitting, short videos that are to the point, kind of the opposite of my channel, right? To the point when it comes to describing things from a red-pilled, black-pilled / MGTOW perspective. He has a lot of unique views and unique takes on issues. He's very well spoken. I feel like if his channel had been made 8 or 10 years ago, that he'd probably have like tens of thousands of subscribers, but because of where we're at with YouTube and demonetization and everything else, he really doesn't have nearly as many subscribers as what he should have. So check out his videos. I'll probably leave a short list of videos that I really enjoyed from his channel. And again, when you see women that act in a way that's degenerate. When you see women that are just total train wrecks, just stay away from them. Do not let them destroy part of what you've worked for by trying to hold you accountable for their bad behaviors, because a lot of these women will do that. A lot of them have very jaded, very negative views of men because of all the men that they've been with, foolishly, right? That they've made poor sexual choices with, basically. A lot of these women are into drugs and alcohol. Just stay away from that whenever you see it. Again, it's even worse than when a guy does those kinds of things, because guys can't just blame you for their own poor choices, but women can. Check out Jo the Philosopher's channel. I hope you guys got something out of this video, and I'll see you on the next one.